time here. We're going to run through a couple of things for you guys. I always appreciate the opportunity to speak with this group and share some of our economic trends, what we're seeing on local demographics, some of our local economic trends, and then some of the things we're doing at the partnership that tie into that and the needs of our business community. So we'll jump right in. This works best if you guys ask questions as we go. So don't like say, when I'm on slide 30, say on slide 3, tell me about this, because then I need to travel all the way back because I won't remember what was on any of those. So a couple of big picture macroeconomic things that all of this, it drives what happens locally. So these are important. The Dow Jones, you see how the Dow Jones, and you guys are very familiar with these because this is a good indicator for you as well. But looking over the past 18 months or so, what has the stock market done? What has been that 24-month change in the stock market? We've seen some ups, we've seen some downs, we seem to be seeing some ups again. A good indicator on a macro standpoint of where we're at and where we've been, right? It doesn't feel really great right now, but we're still above where we were. We're not at the peak, but hopefully moving in that direction. On a year-over-year basis, a little bit hard to read, but I'll point out for you, the yellow is the change in year-over-year. So you saw this huge growth, right? And then you saw this decline. Now you're starting to see the growth again. Blue is previous year. The pink is the current year. So again, giving an indication of where things have been going and on a comparable basis. Consumer confidence index. The consumer confidence is one of the single biggest indicators that we can look at economically to say, how is our economy in Eagle County doing? If you only look at one thing to say, what is the winter season going to look like? What do you think it's going to be? You can look at consumer confidence. It's really the single, if you only look at one, it's the one to look at. And we'll make sure that Mel shares this out with you guys so you have copies of it. But this consumer confidence index, again, you saw when that stock market was really high, consumer confidence was really high. People were feeling really good. They have lots of discretionary money. They felt really good about their retirement portfolios, et cetera. And these things tend to overlap. They're not exact. But the consumer confidence is still a little better than it was. We'll talk about this with regards to inflation and some of the other factors. Still better than where it was. Certainly recently, ups and downs a little bit, not as good as it was at the peak, but still better than what we saw in the history. When we look year over year, again, similar slide to what we saw with the stock market and the Dow Jones. We look at the consumer confidence year over year. Yellow is the change, some down, some up, some down, hopefully some up. Pink, current year, and blue, prior year. So lots of fluctuation with regards to that, and hopefully coming out and starting to trend in the right direction in terms of consumer confidence. Again, the one thing, if you look at one indicator only, consumer confidence is probably the best one. Consumer price index. So consumer price index on a year-over-year basis. Again, similar charts, similar graphs. The change in year-over-year. No surprise, getting a little bit better, consumer price index. And then that pink being the current year and blue being the prior year. Hopefully coming back down a little bit, hopefully being a little more manageable, getting back to the more historic levels that we're seeing in early 2021 and the years prior. This one is a mashup of 50 plus different economic indicators. So you look at consumer confidence, Dow Jones, inflation, everything. This is 50 different economic indicators all mashed into one. And again, a pretty good, this comes from the confidence board. And you can see, again, pretty stable, actually, somewhat remarkably. When you look at all these indicators, what are we seeing? again, we saw that just huge impact when everyone was coming out of the pandemic and everyone had tons of discretionary money and looking to spend it, and but then went back to a more normalized level. So even with all the headwinds, even with all the uncertainty, even with inflation, this index is fairly stable over the past year plus. I don't know if I did that or you did that. Job creation and loss. So what are we looking at with new jobs being created versus job loss? And you see, again, despite inflation, despite uncertainty, despite some of the economic headwinds, we still have net job creation, right? We still have immense workforce shortages in most every industry, locally and nationally. All the trends you've heard about, quiet quitting and supply chain and the other things, and even some tech companies doing layoffs. We're still seeing more jobs than created than jobs lost. It's a good indicator of what the economy is doing, how businesses feel. Businesses generally will not be hiring people when they don't feel optimistic about their short or midterm future. They'll hold off. So we're still seeing job creation. Now, part of this could be they're so short-staffed and have been so short-staffed that there's still a backlog of positions to fill. But it's still good to see more jobs being created than lost. Inflation. This one we're all aware of. You guys feel it, you see it. This almost astronomical growth of inflation starting to come down a little bit. And the feds continue to, you guys watch it because you see the rates and you see everything that they're doing to try and tamper that. But it's starting to come down a little bit. That's a good sign. No one wants inflation above 7, 8, 9%, and we've been there for a long time. Hopefully coming back down. What I would note, and we'll see if I have it here, I don't, so I'll talk about it here. As inflation starts to come down, I actually do have it on this summary slide. So if you need a takeaway, here's the takeaway. With all the charts that we just saw, all the data we just saw, consumer confidence and stock market and indexes and inflation and consumer price index, the economy maybe isn't doing as bad as you'd think. The economy isn't doing as bad as you see on CNBC every morning. I'll share a story last week, maybe some of you might have seen this. The CEO of United Airlines was on CNBC, and they asked him if he thought there would be a recession next year. And he said, none of the indicators that we see at United Airlines indicates that there's a recession coming. But I watch CNBC every morning, and I think there's a recession coming. Right? It's almost like we're talking ourselves into it because all the data you just saw and the data we'll see locally, there's certainly headwinds, but it's almost like a false positive, right? Consumer spending is still above inflation. Even with inflation at 7 or 8%, we're still spending at 8 or 9%. So we're still spending above inflation. In a normal recessionary period, people pull back their spending, and that causes the recession. So that United Airlines CEO story, the only reason I think there's going to be a recession is because you're talking about it every day on CNBC. And if I didn't watch that, there's nothing in my numbers at United that would indicate that. That might just be the travel industry, and that could be whatever else, but I thought it was a funny thing because we're seeing that too. So, and you see the notes here. I'm not going to read it to you, Roger.
Chris, do you know what the unemployment rate currently is in Eagle County versus Colorado versus the country?
Yeah, we're going to talk about that.
Oh, okay, I'll shut up.
Well, no, you don't have to shut up. We'll talk about it when we look at some of the Eagle County numbers. So I'm going to ask you to parking lot that, and we'll get to it. But so when I say the economy isn't doing as bad as you think, it doesn't mean that it's gangbusters. It doesn't mean that there's not significant headwinds. It doesn't mean there's not challenges. But we're still seeing that people are spending more than the inflation numbers. Yes.
Isn't the consumer credit debt going up as well?
In the last month, it has. It wasn't, and now it is. So that's a headwind as well. I don't know if it's typical this time of year. I don't know if that's a holiday thing, but it is going up. I saw that as well. And again, it's a factor. It's where we do see these headwinds, right? It's not to say that things are great. I'm not here telling you that all these numbers are great. I'm telling you it's not as bad as you might think. And we'll look locally and I'll give some context to that. So let's look at our demographics and what Eagle County looks like and maybe where we've come the past couple of years. So we'll start at Colorado and then we'll look at the county. Colorado population. Who thinks we had a huge boom in population during the pandemic? Who thinks Colorado did? Anyone?
Here.
Yeah, some of you?
Yeah.
We didn't. We didn't. We did not see a population boom. Look at the numbers for Colorado. You know, relatively stable, some growth. But look, our slowest population growth since 1990. This is
Big
statewide.
exodus either, right?
Well, slower growth.
No, I
Doesn't mean no growth,
Yeah,
to the point. But Colorado had pretty steady growth for a long time. It's very much stabilized. Our slowest net migration since 2005. So 15, 18 years, 17 years, math, 17 years since we've seen the migration at the levels it is. So we didn't see a population boom. We still saw net growth. But our population actually slowed down. You look, again, this is going back to 1990. You saw this peak.
That's when they legalized marijuana.
And then we saw the decrease. Now some of this is forecasted numbers of what the net migration, and it's very hard to see on here, but you can see right about here, this line, natural increase is birth rate. Yep. And net migration is people moving into the state, right? But we didn't see a huge boom in population. Our slowest growth rate as a state since 1990, our lowest in migration since 2005. So unemployment, told you we'd get to this. Unemployment throughout the region versus the United States versus Colorado. Roger, does this answer your question?
Yes.
This is what you wanted. United States, 3.4, Colorado, 3.5, Eagle County, 2.8. Right? The economists would say 3 to 3.5% unemployment is full employment. That's what the data would suggest. There's about 3% of people, I call them the face tattoo people. I don't see anyone with a face tattoo, so I'm safe saying that it is true. There's about 3% of people that are unemployed. For whatever reason, I joke a little bit about the face tattoo aspect, but 3% of people are unemployable. So if you have 3%, you're essentially at full employment. So we're at full employment for all intents and purposes. And you see some of our neighboring communities and what they're, you know, the mountain region as a whole. Mountain region as a whole has relatively low unemployment levels.
Where's Fauna?
Where's what?
Where Fauna?
I don't know. The highest unemployment in the state and the lowest unemployment in the state. I don't know where these two counties are. Colorado has 64 counties, you know?
South of Pueblo.
South of Pueblo.
Yeah.
So my guess would have been southeast or northeast. One of those two, you know, and they're probably, I would be willing to bet, they're two of the lowest population counties too. Because if you're a really small county and like 2 people don't go back to work, your unemployment spikes. Right? The numbers get moved a little bit versus a county like Eagle with 55,000 people. So that's what our regional unemployment looks like relative to others and our neighbors. Eagle County industry overview. What does the business community look like in Eagle County? What is our mix? What percent in leisure and hospitality? You see that, construction, and go down the list of where some of our employment comes from and what drives our economy. None of this really probably a surprise to you guys. I know it's a little bit hard to see. We'll make sure this gets shared back out with you.
What's TTU?
Travel,
Tourism.
no, that falls into leisure and hospitality. I think TTU is like supply chain and trucking and logistics. We over-index a little bit we certainly over-index. You look at this, the one is the location and the percentage of jobs, right? So you look, one is the state average of where communities are. So you can see where we over-index. Again, not huge surprises. Hospitality and tourism, construction, et cetera, where we under-index. Information technology, manufacturing. You guys know this. It's not a huge surprise to anybody. Population for Eagle County. I should have had some of these floated in to see it so I could quiz you guys. On the average age of Eagle County, 37, in case you didn't see it. We're a relatively young community. Our population right about 55,000. Now that includes Basalt and Elgeville in the Roaring Fork Valley. Our valley is about 50,000, a little less than 50,000, including the whole county about 55,000. And then you see the age breakdown, and I alluded to that a little bit. But you see the age breakdown. Again, we're a relatively young community. Summit County and Eagle County. This will be, we'll make this a quiz. Are two of the healthiest communities. And maybe Dana will talk about this when she does the Mountain Strong presentation. I know some of the Vail Health people talk about this, but two of the healthiest communities in the nation. You know why? Tell them.
Mostly because of me, I think.
Probably. That was a trick question and you got it. So congratulations, you get a taco. It's actually because when you look at the older population, it's 11% of our community, but because of the elevation in Summit County and Eagle County, a lot of people move. Our death rate is extremely low. Don't die.
Get rid of them before they die.
It's true. So it's when you hear we're the healthiest community, and we are generally pretty healthy. A lot of the indicators do that, but no one dies here. We die somewhere else. We get old, we move away, we can't handle the elevation, we die.
We know that as real estate agents, we're just waiting. Are you okay?
Yeah, that's right. So our population growth in Eagle County. Again, these numbers lag a little bit, just by the nature of the reporting and the data. But Eagle County population growth, and you see it's pretty stable. We over the past since 17 to 2020, a little bit of a forecasted growth in 21. So we're stable though. That's the key takeaway from that, is that we're not seeing a huge spike in the past 4 or 5 years. We didn't see a huge spike from the pandemic. What we did see, and why many of you raised your hand before, we're seeing more people here. We're seeing a lot more people spend a lot more time here, which makes it feel like there's more people on my damn trail. And there's more people in the roundabouts, and there's more people on the mountain, and there's more people at the restaurants. And you combine the staffing shortage and workforce shortage with more second homeowners, more vacation rental people spending time here, record levels of occupancy, which we'll look at later. You get that and it feels really busy. Why are people on my damn trail? Why are people on the mountain? Because that's what we do. That's how we all feel. Yeah, that's intentional. I don't mean specifically mine, I mean
Yes.
collectively.
Ours.
Yes. Why are they all on Goose Falls? Whatever it is. But guess what? Go to Gore Creek. There's no one in Gore Creek ever. Right? So anyway, population growth.
Chris, how do you factor in the second homeowners that are like, say, here 2 months to 6 months versus those are permanent people, correct?
No, those are permanent people.
55,000.
Yep. So it would essentially, there's a few different ways that it gets tracked. Where you report your income taxes, right? Where do you report your taxes? Where are you registered to vote? You know, some of those indicators. So if someone spends 6 months a year here and 6 months a year in a different state, and they're in Kansas City, and they're registered to vote in Kansas City, they're in Kansas City's number even if they spend half their time there.
Right.
Right? So that's why it feels more busy. Because by every indicator, which are things we can't really track very well, people are spending more time at their homes here since 2020. Okay, so our population, and how do we look when we slice and dice Eagle County, and what does our population look like? What are the characteristics that we see from Eagle County? Millennials, the younger crowd, 25 to 39 years old. And you see the US average as well on each of these, right? So the US average is the little pin that gets dropped, is the US average versus our average. So we index a little bit over on younger people, 25 to 39. Usually because, and I don't think I have this slide in here, but because we have a huge influx of people from age 22 to 26.
Yeah.
And then we see a pretty stable population from 26 to 30. And then from about 31 to 65, we see a huge net out migration. More people leave age 31 to 65 than come here. But age 22 to 26,
Living the dream.
live in the dream.
Yeah.
Live in the dream. So millennials, you look at the people retiring soon, about the same as the young people. So about 13,000 people retiring soon. National average, a little bit below us. Racial diversity, you see the US as a whole versus Eagle County. Veterans, we index a little bit low. Violent crime, we index very low. And property crime, we index pretty low. So a little bit about the makeup of our community and some of the things we see on a macro level from a population
Chris,
standpoint.
when were those polls pre-pandemic, like during the last?
No, these are updated numbers.
Right.
Yeah, we have, you can look at this type of information on vailvalleymeansbusiness.com. If you go to vailvalleymeansbusiness.com, we have labor information, we have demographics, we have things you can export PDFs of some of these charts and some of this information. And those pull from, it's a feed that pulls from a variety of different places, but it's all a data feed. So it's updated as the numbers are updated. Again, continuing to flow through with Eagle County and what our community looks like. You can see the age distribution again. So you can do it by year and see how it changes. You can toggle through some of the different information. And as I mentioned before, we see that huge increase of people who come here in their 20s and tend to leave in their 30s. But still the majority of our people in their 30s. As you saw, our median age before was 37. On this one, it shows 35. It's just pulling from different data feeds, but that's pretty close. 35, 37, we're a younger community overall. Labor force. This is where it starts to get kind of scary. Okay, labor force information. And again, pulling from different tools at different points in time. You saw 2.8% on the unemployment. On this one, it was 2.3%. It's just pulling on from a different standpoint. Our labor market in Eagle County, labor force is 34,000. 55,000 people in the county. Not everyone in the county can work.
Right.
So we have kids in elementary school,
Yeah.
right? We have kids who are not part of the labor force, right? So they can't. But 34,000, our labor force participation, I don't think I have a slide on labor force. Our labor force participation is way over indexed to the national average. You know, we don't have as many one-income families as a typical city might, or a typical town might, or a rural community might. Because of the cost of living, we tend to have more dual income families. So our labor force is really pretty high. Our labor force participation is around 72 to 74%. Nationally, labor force participation is about 58 to 60%. We're more people working in Eagle County. We still have 10 to 15% open jobs. 10 to 15% more jobs than there are people to fill that, right? And it's industry agnostic. I think we'll talk about that a little bit. What are the largest job counts? By occupation, you can see these big buckets. These big buckets are not as interesting locally. So our community looks a little different than many others. So you need to fit people into these kind of square hole, round peg type situations. But those are the buckets that have the most jobs from a labor standpoint for Eagle County. Those of you who have seen me present before, I should have made this one a quiz as well. Tommy, I'm going to test your math. What percent of our businesses in Eagle County have less than 10 employees?
Wow. Like
90%.
Yeah, add 67 and 17.
Can I just estimate that?
Yeah, you can estimate. It's close.
70, 80, 85%.
Yeah,
That's the 10.
over 80% of our businesses have less than 10 employees. 90% of our businesses have less than 20. Okay, so like absorb that for a minute. When you think about our business community, when you think about going to the bookwork right upstairs, or a local restaurant or a local activity provider, where you go and have a great time at Zip Adventures of Vail. Our community is driven by small business, right? Vail Resorts, they're huge. They're on the New York Stock Exchange, and God bless them for what they provide for us, right? I'm not here to defend or anything with Vail Resorts. They are what they are. They're a huge employer, but they're not our business community, right? Tommy and the foundation, these guys are one of the biggest employers in the community.
Yeah.
At about 80 people,
Yeah, we're like 7.
ballpark, 70. One of the bigger employers at 70 people, right? So you think about it, it's important. Yeah, East West is in this category probably, right? So like, and again, just context for you as you think about it, and you think of the bigger companies that get the headlines and get the news. Most of our businesses, and by most, 80 to 90%, have fewer than 20 people or even fewer than 10. Just good context and a little bit of a wow moment. Yeah.
How is Vail Resorts accounted for there, given the percentage of their employees who work in Brookfield?
Yeah.
I couldn't hear.
It's how is Vail Resorts accounted for in this data, given the fact that they have employees in Brookfield and in Park City and in Whistler and everywhere else? These are people who are located here. But they have 6,000 people that work for them.
Paying taxes in Eagle County.
Yeah.
That's how we're.
Yeah. Who live and work and get their W-2 in Eagle County. Yeah, and this is W-2 jobs. Our workforce, again, the educational attainment, this is just all the types of information that is all available on the website that you guys can pull. Income and spending, median household income. It's actually higher than the state on median household income, although our wages are below the state. Right, so again, a little bit of a misnomer here. Median household income includes all income, right? So median household income versus the average wage. Our average wage is a little bit below the state because we're so driven by hospitality and lower wage jobs, even though our hospitality industry pays about 25% above the state average. Right, so just little stuff as you look at the numbers. So what's our takeaway on some of those local trends? Our workforce shortage is not going away anytime soon. Businesses, we do business retention interviews. We're out talking to businesses all the time. Most businesses are planning to grow. Those that aren't are artificially keeping their people because they're just focused on doing what they're doing and they know they can't find the workforce to grow. But our workforce shortage is not going away. The demographics are actually pretty scary. Top birth year for the state of Colorado, 2007. Those kids are 15 years old right now. There's not a huge swing of young people coming to fill jobs. Our birth rate is declining. And our birth rate has been declining for a long time. Nationally and locally, we're in a ton of trouble from a workforce standpoint. It's just the numbers. It's basic math. Even Tommy could do math. And we saw his math skills.
Do you know how many kids Krista has this year in the career program?
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about CareerWise. We will have 50 businesses with youth apprentices, and we'll have 30 kids placed. So there's, again, similar to the overall numbers. Youth apprentice is a little different. We'll talk a little bit about that program, but 50 jobs, 30 kids to fill them. Every other community in Colorado doing the youth apprenticeship program that we do with CareerWise has more kids than businesses. We're flipped. We have more businesses offering apprentices than kids doing apprentices. So our growth rate continues to slow. We didn't see the pandemic boom. And that, of course, housing remains a foundational challenge to everything we're trying to do. Interestingly, and not in a positive way, our workforce shortages are industry agnostic. So we've had workforce challenges in some form or fashion since like today in 1962. 60 years since they turned the first chairlift on Vail Mountain today, right?
Aw.
I know, how about that?
Yeah.
Happy birthday. But even then, they had workforce challenges, right? And in the 70s, there were workforce challenges. In the 80s, there were workforce challenges. The difference today is it's every industry, right? We've always had skilled trades and hospitality workforce shortages. Right now, it's healthcare, it's nonprofits, it's information technology, it's skilled trades, it's everything. Every industry has workforce shortages. And as I said before, with some of the data numbers, maybe not real estate. Maybe not real estate. Yeah.
It seems like indicators show there's gonna be more realtors leaving now.
Chris, question on, do you have any statistics on the population of retired people, baby boomers, say here versus other places?
I'd have to dig and do some cross-check.
I'm just curious, how many people, what the percentages of retired people that are just enjoying the,
I can pull that and send it to Mel to send out to you guys.
so I'm just curious.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head.
Well, and to your point earlier, and how long do they actually last?
Right.
Because I think a lot of them come here and they only can make it 15, 20 years and they can't breathe, so they leave, right?
Right.
And they have the option to not be here for one of the seasons.
Yeah,
Right.
they can, yeah. So, let's look at some of the lodging trends and get a little bit micro because this drives our economy and what are we gonna see? What do we see this winter? So let's look backwards and then we'll look forward. Backwards at the summer months. And for reference, the blue is this year. The red is last year. So summer of 21 versus summer of 2020. June was the end of about 16 months of increased and or record occupancy every single month. 16 months of record occupancy. July, August, we started seeing a decrease. To be expected. It was that pipeline grew, but still at really historically good numbers, right? And we'll talk about it when we move to the winter.
Is this Vail only?
This is Vail.
Okay.
Yeah, Beaver Creek is similar, not exactly the same, but similar. Beaver Creek's data isn't supposed to be publicly shared. So Vail is because they use taxpayer money to spend. Vail's paid for by taxpayer dollars. Beaver Creek pays for it privately.
Metro.
Yeah. So anything paid for by taxpayer dollars, I share because I could freedom of information request that. Winter occupancy joke, but it's true. Winter occupancy, this is as of November 30th, right? So data looking forward as of November 30th. So November ended up pretty darn close to last November. Last November, we had no snow. This November, we had really good snow. November, in the scheme of things, doesn't matter much, looking ahead. So the gray bar that you see is where we ended last year. Okay, red is where we were last year at this time. Blue is where we are this year. So tracking that. The black bar is the pacing to last year. You see in December, yes,
So are you projecting December?
it's down 17%.
So the blue is your projection.
No, the blue is where we are as of December 30th, or as of November 30th. So it's not a projection
Bookings.
with bookings, lodging occupancy, lodging bookings,
Okay.
looking here. So the number of people that will be in town, right? The number of rooms filled.
Is it taking into account VRBOs too?
Only professionally managed ones. Only professional, so it does include professionally managed vacation rentals, but not you doing it on your own. And your neighbor hated you for it, yeah. Probably. Betsy's neighbor could hate her for any number of reasons. That's just one.
Yeah.
So December down 17%. We won't, I don't anticipate we're going to end at 17%. Right, and for January, down 4%, February 8%, March 7%, April 5%. We'll make up some of that ground because traditionally, we've been doing these reports for 20 years. Traditionally, in economic uncertainty and recessionary timeframes, the booking window is short. Right, people book closer to arrival. On October 31st, we were down 24% for December. In the month of December, we went down, in the month of November for bookings for December, we went from 24 to 17%.
24 to 17.
Yeah, we were down 24% on October 31st and down 17% on November 30th. So in that month, we shrank that. I anticipate in December with the snow, with all the factors, that we'll probably shrink that again. We'll probably end around 10 to 12% down. Still not great, but not 24. Yes.
Can it be contributed to COVID restrictions being lifted too? Like people that couldn't go to Europe now all of a sudden can?
Sure. Yes. So when we look at this and we see we're down 8% for the winter, I mentioned earlier the record occupancy for 16 months in a row. Last winter, every month last winter, that you see here, 77%, 65%, those were either right at or above record occupancy for as long as we've been tracking this. Because of no international travel or limited international travel, because of those restrictions, because people have the pent up demand. So yeah, that's a huge part of it. This is to be expected. And again, I don't think we'll end up at 8%. I think we'll end up the winter down about 4 or 5.
Chris, do we have data on international travel versus domestic?
Not yet. After the fact, we can look back and I can tell you some of that. By all accounts, international travel is returned or is returned. But I can only look backwards at that data.
I was just traveling in Europe and I did speak with not only people in the hotel industry, tourism industry, I was out with guides and I questioned him on all this. They said it's out of control. I mean,
Yeah.
it's busier than it's ever been in the history of them remembering tourism. Like the streets are packed, the hotels are at max occupancy, all the flights are booked. It's
Yeah.
like insane. So I think that
The ton of
goes with
pent up,
exactly what you're
the
saying.
pent up demands.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at with that. We'll look at it on a daily basis compared to the industry. How is Vail doing relative to the industry? And this is a little bit hard to read. The black line at the bottom is flat. That's a 0%, right? Any of the little bars above the line means that Vail's doing better than the industry. The industry consisting of 26 Western ski resorts. Breckenridge, Park City, Jackson Hole, Steamboat, Beaver Creek, all of them. So you take all the data and you say, compare it to Vail. Above the line means we're beating the industry, below the line means that we are behind the industry in pacing. So again, when I say that we're going to be just fine, this looks pretty good relative to the industry as a whole, even though our occupancies are down, right? I don't think most people in the business community or even in the lodging community want last year's occupancies. It was very hard for them with staffing to provide the guest experience. I was in a meeting before this with a couple of hoteliers. Like, we don't ever want it to be like that again. Right? They were making a lot of money, but they didn't feel good about it. Right? They couldn't provide the service, they couldn't, you know. So this overall, again, not suggesting that it's great to be down, but you need the context. It's okay, we're gonna be fine. This is Vail's occupancy, again, hard to read, but the red is Vail, the green is everybody else. Point in time, looking backwards, looking forwards, right? So looking backwards, over the summer months, how did Vail fare relative to the other ski resorts that we're able to track? We don't know, we know who they are, but not what individual lines or what resort. So one of these is Aspen, one of them is Steamboat, one of them is Snowmass, one of them is Park City. The red one is Vail. So over the summer months, we're about average. Our occupancy is about average. Our bed base is bigger than a lot of those folks, so we have more people here. But our occupancy is about average. Looking ahead at the winter months, you see it, it's a little hard to see, and I apologize for that, but we'll get this sent out. We're at or above the industry average every single month. Right? So we're driven by our winter months, which is no surprise to any of you guys. Even though we're increasingly popular in the summer, relative to the industry, we're still pretty average. Winter, we're usually the top 3 every single month. Right? January, Aspen's #1 every month. Who can tell me why Aspen's #1 every month? I'll tell you, there's 2 acceptable answers in their month, right?
Is it the Food and Wine Festival?
No, because that's in June.
New Year's.
But maybe they come back in January. I don't know, but that's not it. No.
That New Year's stories.
Everyone has New Year's.
They have less bed base.
Well, less bed base leads to a higher occupancy with the brand for sure, but there's 2 reasons. One is X Games. For a 10-day period, they're sold out. With all the support staff, with the athletes, with the normal visitation. So any excess gets pulled in by X Games for 10 days. That entire time is sold out. Following X Games is Steve. And they have a week that they essentially sell out their entire town with the folks who are normally coming, plus a huge program that's in January. So Aspen's always #1 in January.
So with the wax ski week coming
Yeah.
to Vail, that's gonna be good.
Yeah, the National Brotherhood of Skiers is coming to Vail. It's a huge program. And it will drive, we'll see a bump for that week, for sure, because it's a big program.
When is that?
I think it's the very end of January, beginning of February. Don't quote me on the exact date, I don't remember.
And is the Burton Open moved or not?
Yeah, they're
happening?
gone.
They're done.
They're gone.
So the Burton Open is not happening, but Vail has a lot of events on the calendar. Again, when we compare ourselves to the industry, we're good in the summer. We tend to be leading in the winter, and we're above average for most every month of the winter. Key takeaways for you guys. What do you need to know about this? Visitation growth and lodging occupancy. It was never sustainable. It was never sustainable, and we wouldn't want it because they're all on our damn trails, right? We talked about that. We're seeing a little bit of the reset, We're still historically above average. If in 19, you would have said, here's where we are in 23, most everyone would have said, yeah, we'll take it. Right, so no need for consternation. In 23, we'll see a return to normal, right? Normal, hopefully less people on sick, better for the guest experience, better for the local infrastructure.
So Chris, just before you leave that data, understanding it, you made the comment about you have Vail, the apps, can't give Creek's info. When Aspen gives their data, do they take in Aspen, Buttermilk, Aspen Highlands, Snowmass?
City of Aspen.
So that's just city of Aspen.
Yeah, Aspen and Snowmass is separate.
Yeah.
So it's the
So that
occupancy
data is
within the
just
town of the city of
Aspen.
Aspen. Eagle County Regional Airport, Mel, how am I doing that time?
It's
fast.
12:24,
Go fast.
but I let, yeah.
Okay. So winter
We're
service
fine.
in the airport, new flight this winter from Austin, Texas. Maintained our flight service from most of the other locations. We did lose Philadelphia. I think that might have been last year, maybe it was this year. But the flight map, flyvail.com has all the flights. We're excited about the new Austin service.
What can you tell us about the lower budget airline that has been rumored to be moving into the Eagle County Airport? Are we gonna get Southwest here or what?
So you started that question for me really nicely.
Yeah.
And then you're like, tell me what I want to know.
That is an A-lister, I want an answer. Yes.
Friggin' wrong. So here's what I'll answer that. We have $1 million grant we've received to bring and attract a low-cost carrier to the Eagle County Regional Airport. We have 5 years to spend that $1 million grant. That's a good thing, right? It's matched with the funding we have in the bank and the fundraising we do every year. To answer your question directly with Southwest, I've been to Dallas twice to meet with them and encourage them to come out here. The airport and the consultants have met with them at any number of conferences. 2 issues. One is aircraft. They need the 737 MAX. They're short on aircraft. They need the 737 MAX because of Red Mountain at the end of the runway. And they have a pilot shortage. They need the pilots. When the aircraft and the pilots come, they'll be here. My prediction would be 2024, 2025.
Awesome.
The 24-25 ski season.
Awesome.
That's my prediction. Most likely, based on what they've done in Steamboat and in Montrose, would be a Denver connection. So funneling people through Denver in and out on Southwest. I expect we'll see a low-cost carrier before we see Southwest. And then we'll see Southwest probably, with what I know today, 2024 or 25.
Awesome.
So-
Thank you.
Thanks for the easy question. So annual enplanements, this is what we see happening at the airport. Enplanement trends, you can see year over year. And again, we'll send this out to you guys so you don't need to read the eye chart and see, no surprise, the first quarter leads the way. 2022 is the green. So you see at the airport. Really, we don't talk about 2020. Look, these numbers are pretty good. We don't talk about 2020 here, rather. Right? Because we can talk about 2020 here, pre-COVID. But the growth at the airport, up 5% from 2021, up 9% from the pre-pandemic timeframe. Good news, especially if you work with international clients. We are working to get an international customs facility. Customs and Border Patrol at Eagle County Regional Airport. We've been working on this for about 15 years. No, truly. And it was always, no. And then it was, maybe. And then it was, yeah, because everyone coming through Denver International says they're coming to Vail, especially South American and Mexican clients. So we're in the design for the airports, in the design phase, they're about 60% done with that. We have support from congression. They used to call this an earmark. If you're familiar with the term earmark, they don't call it earmark anymore because it got really bad press. So now they call it congressional direct spending. It's an earmark. But Bennett's office, we received support from Bennett's office for funding to help support this. So it's a really big deal for the airport and probably for your business.
Time frame on that, did you say? I know
As
15
soon
years
as-
in the making, but.
As soon as, I mean, the design aspect is 60% done, could very well be under construction by 2024 to open in 25.
Awesome,
So,
awesome.
Chris, because Aspen does not have.
No.
So they would actually increase
Or could.
travel into Eagle, which would. become-
Yeah, it is beneficial,
Yeah.
hugely beneficial. What we see with Aspen, we see about 16 to 17% of people who fly into Eagle County Regional Airport go somewhere else. Mostly Pitkin County. Not all, some Garfield, like 0.6% to Steamboat for some reason. I love Steamboat, but I wouldn't fly into Eagle to go to Steamboat. But what we see with that 16% is that people who go to Pitkin County from Eagle, mostly on flights that can't fly to Aspen. So they're coming from New York. Aspen doesn't have flights from New York, right? So that's what we see mostly. Takeaways for the airport. I talked about these. I'm gonna be really, really quick here because Mel's gonna yell at me and give me the hook. Who we are at Vail Valley Partnership and some of the things we do. Why do we exist? These are our core goals. You guys can find this out on the website. You can reach out to anyone on my team. I'll have coffee with you. I'd love to talk about all of this stuff. It's really fun for me because I'm a geek and I have nothing better to do. So at Vail Valley Partnership, I want to talk about some of the programs specifically. This one I'm really excited about. You guys may, if you remember pre-pandemic, when I met with you, we talked about this. We've been working on this for 3.5 years. Mountain Healthcare Coalition. I just signed a contract with a partner. Took us 3.5 years to get recognition from the state of Colorado to have a healthcare purchasing cooperative. 3.5 years of working with the Department of Insurance.
Are you gonna keep the One Valley program still?
Yep, we're gonna keep the One Valley program. We're gonna add this. So this is going to be a product on the marketplace for individuals and small group. We expect it's going to be a decrease in pricing of 12 to 15% from the current pricing. We're in the process now of doing an RFP for payers and negotiating with our provider community to build a plan for our community that, you know, may or may not scale beyond our community, but we're going to start in the Eagle River Valley and be able to offer a traditional insurance product for the small group and the individual market that will be a better product at a lower price than you can purchase today.
Yes.
Yes. It's a big deal. Well, and again, I started this process in August of 2019, working with the state of Colorado. And I need adult beverages to talk about all the details. The government getting in the way is a real thing. Vail Valley Works. This is our workforce and professional development training. We have online training courses, we have in-person courses, we have leadership programs, we have board service programs, we have all kinds of training and customer service and supervisor skills. All of these programs, we've spun this off as its own separate 501c3 organization to attract state and federal grant dollars to support our people and support businesses investing in professional development for their staff and individuals who want to grow their own professional skills or do online courses or get certificates. We have a dozen different certificate programs we're offering through this as well. And the CareerWise Eagle County program, Betsy, you asked about that. Our youth apprenticeship program. Christy Beidel works with the schools. Eric Williams on our team works with the business community. We have about 50 businesses teed up and about 30 kids who landed apprenticeships. The program is a resounding success. We have people calling us from around the country and around the state asking how we're doing what we're doing. And it's because I have a great team and we have a great business community who understands they need to grow their own because those workforce numbers don't work.
And these are mainly high school students that are
High
working
school
with you?
students. It's a 2-year program. Their senior year, they work part-time, they go to school part-time. They receive actually school and college credit for their work. And then they have the year after that, the bonus year, that they're working full-time at the business with some credentialing or some Colorado Mountain College effort layering in depending on the kid's interest.
Cool.
So we have HVAC kids getting professional certifications, we have professional jobs, we have bankers, we have most every industry sector. Kids in construction, we had a kid who sat down with, we brought some of these kids at a round table with Senator Hickenlooper, who was governor when we launched this program, so he was familiar with it. And this young man named Brandon said Schaefer Hyde, he was ready to drop out of school. Did his youth apprenticeship with Schaefer Hyde Construction in Eagle Vale. And Brandon said, I was ready to drop out of school. I did this. Now I'm at CU Boulder, on track to graduate with honors, still working part-time for Schaefer Hyde. And he, Senator, you need to make sure every kid has the opportunity I had. And he finger waved the senator. And Hickenlooper, to his credit, went to the small business committee the next week in Washington, DC and said, I met with this kid Brandon in Eagle County and shared the story and everything. So it's a really cool program. And Mel's fully kicking me off.
No.
Does that also then, it sounds like it also includes a component of guidance, counseling
Oh, yes.
for those that do want to
Yeah.
continue on and, okay.
Yeah, it does. So that program ends with the kid having an opportunity for a full-time job at prevailing wages. 1 year out of high school.
Okay.
Pretty cool.
But that's-
It also, but they have a business coach and a counselor. So they're getting it both on the education side and on the workforce side. So each business is required to have the supervisory skills, and someone who goes through a class with us to learn how to work with a 17 or 18 or 19-year-old kid. Because it's different than working with someone who's older with their schedules and with workflow and everything. So they're getting the counseling from school, and they're getting the business through their business coach.
Is she pulling from all three, from Red Canyon, Eagle Valley?
Red Canyon, Eagle Valley, and Battle Mountain.
But what about?
We're also
private
working
sector?
with, so Vail Christian and Vail Mountain School. We've had conversations with them, but they haven't come on board yet. But yes, we have kids from Red Sandstone, Battle Mountain, and Eagle Valley, all being pretty successful or who have gone through the program.
Vail Christian and VMS have 100% college mentorship, right? So
This
that's
doesn't
probably what
limit
it
kids from going
has.
to college.
Right, but it's
Right.
interesting.
We
that
call
it
it
just
options
takes
Lets them
the
find, it
opportunity.
could be that gap
Right.
where they find, what do I want to do? Do the businesses offer any sort of financial assistance, scholarship
Yeah.
programs, so
They're
that
supposed
the
to
kids
pay
come
them.
back?
They pay them.
They pay them.
Yeah, they pay them. Some businesses are helping pay for kids' school
That's,
after.
yeah, that's all.
Not all, they're not required to,
Right.
but they have to pay. It's a competitive environment. Those businesses are paying a prevailing wage, a training wage, an apprentice, however they set it up. They're paying the kids a wage. And then they're saying if the kid is successful, then that they'll offer them a job at the prevailing wages at the end of it. So it's a really cool program.
Do you still have the program to where when people move that you help their
Yes,
spouses?
We
find
do.
jobs?
And that might have been there before, well, but I don't know. What program was called? Yeah, it worked for you guys as realtors to know. We have a trailing partner program, trailing spouse program. It's called My Partner Career Network, where when people move and relocate to the valley, more in executive level positions is what it's designed for, but we'll do it for anybody. We'll meet with them, we'll do an informational interview, and then we have a list of about 65 human resource professionals throughout the valley that agree to meet with that person if they're in the industry sector. So if someone relocates here and they're in whatever field, we will set them up with informational interviews with human resource professionals in that field to help them grow their network, to help them find jobs that may or may not be listed or promoted, and help them integrate into the community. We started that years ago because what we saw was we were having a lot of retention trouble with director, VP type positions where people were coming in and they would love it here for all the reasons you might love it here, but their spouse hated it here because they couldn't grow their network, they couldn't find meaningful work, et cetera. So we have that program. We have about a 94% success rate of placing people in jobs in their fields. So it's cool. If you guys have people relocating here, reach out to us. We'll do an informational interview. We'll help make them feel helped.
So again, I'm with the Vail Valley Foundation, right? Most of you know, Danny, you volunteer with the Vail Valley Foundation. I was talking to Dana, George does. Volunteers are really the heart and soul of what we do. So thanks to all of you for that. You can see, you're going to see a lot, or hopefully you have already seen what we're really talking about. It's really hard to communicate about the VBF because we do a lot of different things. And in 1981, when we were formed, it was kind of like there weren't that many people in town. And there were all these nonprofits. They're like, let's just put them all under one roof and they'll do, let's see, arts, athletics, and education. Okay, and the Vail Valley Foundation was born. Well, now, many years later, there's probably 200 odd nonprofits. And although we are probably one of the larger and nonprofits, and certainly we think a force for good in the Valley, it is hard to communicate what we do. What is the one thing that like pulls all our stuff together? How do I explain to people in a room like this what the Vail Valley Foundation does in arts, athletics, and education? And the way that I've been saying it and that we've been saying it lately is we make moments, right? Whether you're at the Vail Dance Festival, whether you're working with the Youth Power 365 Education Initiative, which works with kids from early childhood all the way through elementary school, into college and career, dollars for scholarship, all of it, every step of the way, we have education programming. And then we've got our athletics, mountain games, and the recently concluded Xfinity Birds of Prey. Those are all of the things that we do. That's just your kind of quick refresher to what we do. It's so helpful for us, y'all. Communicating, it's always word of mouth. Everything else we do in marketing, PR is really secondary to folks like you kind of understanding who we are. Even when I grew up in this town and, I was like, oh, what, do we get to be involved in Bravo? Bravo is a separate organization. And if you're coming to this town and you've only just been visiting, you might think Bravo and the Vail Valley Foundation are all one thing. Or I've had people say, oh, you work with Chris Romer from the Vail Valley Partnership. Nope, that's a different organization. And so the more that you all can help communicate and clear that up for us, the better. But that's actually not what I'm here to talk about. I just want everyone to know what the VVF is and who we are, what we do. And then I'm going to talk about a special initiative we have on our Vail Valley childcare. It's a neat little video that shows making moments and all the moments that we make. With calling ourselves very cute. A lot of cute little kids graduating from the Magic Bus. That moment at the mountain games where you go through the mud run and you're covered in mud and you
should be able to
hug your parents. I mean,
advance it.
that's what all the like. And then you think about it too. It's like, I didn't really realize growing up here. I was like, this town's so cool. There's so much to go. Like I was exposed to classical music, I was exposed to dance and the arts. We were going to shows at the Ford Amphitheater, and then there was after school education programming and that you could just kind of jump in on. There was so much going on, and only now looking back, we're like, oh, that's Vail Valley Foundation. And because we do so much, we have so many different activities, and they're so disparate. But all together, what is it? We're making moments. We're making moments for families at free Hot Summer Nights concerts down at Showdown Town in Eagle. You pull out that cooler and you watch those concerts. That's us. And the thing that ties it all together is that we're making moments. Well, we have been doing that in arts, athletics, and education since 1981, but there was something else from the very beginning when Gerald R. Ford and company started the Vail Valley Foundation. They also wanted us to be in service to the community. You can go to the next slide. So the real reason we do all this is to serve our community. And when we went into the pandemic in particular, we've done this before, but sometimes there are things that don't necessarily fit neatly into the arts, athletics, and education component of what we do. But we are the right organization to go in and step in and be that convener to bring people together in the community to solve a problem. When COVID struck, we needed to get the 7 different governments of this community together. We needed to bring them together with businesses and hotels and individual donors and say, how are we going to communicate about this? How are we going to unify our messaging? How are we going to handle this? What are our mask rules going to be in Edwards versus Vail versus, because at the time, if you remember, everyone's like, I don't know, we were kind of like, people were handwriting signs and sticking them to their shop windows. Well, there's got to be an organization that can bring everybody together that isn't, no one's going to be like, the town of Avon is unifying everyone. No, because the town of Vail is going to be like, why aren't we? So somebody has to step into that breach. And oftentimes that's us. That's the Vail Valley Foundation. And we aren't necessarily the ones with the expertise, but we are in the position to bring together individual donors, governments, and businesses and say, let's get big things done. We've done that in the past, obviously, with like the Alpine World Ski Championships, 1989, 99, and 2015. That is our organization that organizes that. Now, the whole community, probably most of you, help make that happen. But somebody's got to be the group that can pull it all together, that can go across boundaries. So coming out of the pandemic, we put together the VVF Community Engagement Committee. It's just a committee of citizens and members of our board and staff, including myself, who got together and said, all right, let's keep this going, right? We are going to phase out of working on COVID and unifying folks for our response to COVID. What else can we do? We also thought, is there something that aligns a little bit with our mission? And the answer, after much deliberation, was childcare. Does anyone have any young kids in childcare? And was it easy, Doris, to go get it in?
Possible.
Yeah.
Bucky, a new place opened up.
Yeah.
We got our second one in because we got the first one.
Right. And how about you? I mean,
I was in a wait list for 2 years.
wait list for 2 years. Yeah, that's about,
we listen, I was pregnant.
right, and you have to sign up for daycare before you decide to have kids. That's how that works. That isn't, that, it's one of the things that, Chris Romer is involved in this. He's actually on that committee. It's something that everyone in this community is talking about. And it's something that we think, hey, you know what? Maybe we can get in there and we can be part of finding the solution to this. So we are leading an effort to incrementally create affordable childcare options in the community. This is the convening aspect of what I'm talking about. We aren't going to go out there and do this single-handedly. That's not how we operate. That's not who we are, and that's not what we do. The first stakeholder group we've reached out to are other daycare providers. They know the business. They are in the middle of this thing. They are the ones struggling daily to find staffing, to create more, to find a location. Their licensing for a childcare is extremely complex and difficult. You cannot, for example, do it on the second story. It has to be on the first story of a building. There has to be all of the different handicap and accessible options in there. There has to be enough space per child. It is extremely and cumbersomely expensive and difficult to be licensed and to operate properly. You've got to have staff. Staff is incredibly difficult to come by.
Do you work with early childcare partners as well?
Yeah, so that's the first stakeholder group that we reach out to, is all the people that are to do this in the valley. And we aren't necessarily saying, we are not at all going in and saying like, hey, we know all the answers, we're gonna come in and fix this. All we're doing is saying, you all are experiencing this issue. What we see it as an issue. What's the solution? How do we fix this? And we are also working with Beaver County Schools. All the different governments are very, very interested in helping make this happen. And as you can see, there's state resources. I highlighted one of those here. Northwest Council of Governments has a lot of data and information, et cetera, et cetera. So this is not VVF out on its own. This is VVF bringing together the people that need to come together to solve this, right?
And I don't see Vail Resorts up there. Are they partnering with you to try and do an on-site or a childcare program for all their employees?
This is kind of fits under the category of the Vail Valley Partnership in the business community, right? Certainly, what do we really need to do? You saw the list of the big employers. There's not many of them, right? We're one of the bigger ones at 60, 70 people, okay, as Vail Valley. So what do we really need to do? We need to form a coalition of businesses to create some options there. And I'm going to show you what those are in a second. So here you go. Here's the problem. Shortage of childcare facilities. There's an estimated 2,000 to 3,000 infant to pre-K children who would attend licensed childcare facilities if given the option. That doesn't count people that say, no, I'm going to do friends, family, neighbor options, FFN. I'd rather just have my friend, she watches, 3 families, kids, and then we trade off and they have a little system going. That's not including those people. It's people like you, people like me when my kids were young, George, anyone who's been through this issue. It is torturous. It is extremely difficult. And you can't keep working your job. I have a colleague who literally has to just cancel all our meetings sometimes because she can't get daycare. That obviously impacts our workforce, and our employers are keenly interested in helping solve this issue. So how do we do it? Financial aid is obviously a big issue. We've got to make the community more appealing location to operate facilities. That's a big one that I don't want to unpack it too much, but fundamentally getting staffing is a big issue. Some of these childcare providers, when we speak to them, they're licensed to have more people so that George can send his kids there, but they don't have the employees and they can't really pay the rate that those employees want to staff up correctly so that they can add the number of people that they actually, so we need to provide housing for those folks. We need to make sure that they're compensated, and we need to make this an attractive place for them. I don't think there's a lot of daycare professionals in Denver that want to move up here and deal with the cost of living and all the snow and all the difficulties in finding a place to live just so they can make the wages that are typically paid of a childcare provider, right? That's the issue. We need to get more, we need to make this an attractive place to come live and be, so that we can actually fill those slots that already exist. And we also need to make more slots. So we've got, because we've got 2,000 or 3,000 kids out there at any given time that are looking for a place to go. And that's why your wait list is 2 years long. And that's not working. It's really not working out there. We don't think that we can solve the problem right away. You can't wave your wand, but we're also not going to do nothing for 10 years. So we want to test out an employer-based model combined with the nonprofit model and see if we can do this and make it work in Avon. So the employers that we are speaking to, Vail Health, Vail Resorts, ourselves, East-West Partners, on down to that list that Chris showed earlier, we are working and advocating that they provide childcare locations or childcare spots as a benefit, much like you would with healthcare. So you
How's
say
that being received by a company like Vail Resorts?
verbally, a lot of enthusiasm. Rubber meeting road, it's gonna take time.
I mean, I'm shocked.
Right.
they're even
It takes time.
Considering it.
Yeah, and I can't speak to Vail Resorts specifically. They do have and have had childcare programs,
Yeah.
Crater Lane and stuff like that. So they're a large enough entity that they may deal with this problem on their own and may not, where we're finding more success is building coalitions with smaller employers. A great example is Johannes Fessler and Sonnenau. He's the chairman of this committee. He is helping lead the way on this issue so that his employees have a place to send their kids. And if you're employed in this valley by one of these larger institutions, the idea would be you would have a place so that when you go and work for the Vail Valley Foundation, at any given time, we're going to have 4 to 6, maybe 10 employees that need childcare. We're going to have those spaces available for those employees. That's the goal. We're not there yet. Okay. I won't read through all these, but you see that the bottom one is find and build facilities. That's obviously a big part of it. So we are getting started on that. Town of Avon has been an incredible partner and helped provide us with a plot of land to build a daycare facility. That facility has been granted to the Vail Valley Foundation to lead this project under the conditions that let me make sure I get this right. We need to raise the additional $6 to $8 million that it's going to take to build the facility. We need to make sure that some percentage of the rights, some percentage of the daycare spots go to Town of Avon residents. And we also need to include affordable housing in the project. Okay, so the goal is we are now in the process of raising the money to build a facility on this plot of land here. That
Where's the tree farm?
can you see? I don't know if you can see, but this is the Walmart.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. There we go. There's my little bit. There's Walmart.
Yeah.
There's the river down here. So this is Avon. This isn't one of the 9 roundabouts in Avon. Avon has granted us the land. It's worth between 6 and 9 million, depending on day of the week. And they are saying to us, we will not make you pay for the land, but you need to make this happen. You need to serve 130 to 150 children ages 0 to 5. A portion of it also needs to be affordable. So for my children, as what counts as middle class in Eagle County, that's fine. But we also need to make sure that people are making, there are people that live in this valley that make $25K a year, or, you know, a family, they're making 40 or 50K a year. They need a place at the table as well.
This is walking distance from Eagle Bend, so it makes it very easy for those families to get
That's
there.
right. I'm going to skip over that. This is going to be a 5 to 7 year process, during this, we are already pursuing other locations. We are looking at Edwards and then also down the valley. What we want to do is basically see if this works. It looks like it's working. If it's working, we want to replicate it. And then we go on down the valley and hopefully, you know, can we create 2,000 new places? That's a lot. I mean, look how much effort, and this has taken us a year to get to creating 130 to 150. But can we create a groundswell of what is really the issue? Getting people who can come and work the jobs and make being in the daycare industry a career path. So that, and coming to our community to do that, that needs to be an inviting thing. Do I see a question?
Question on, so June Creek Elementary, that switch from elementary school to
Early childhood.
early childhood. How does that fit in? Is that, I mean,
We're
a
not-
school district? but
We're not the
still
only
it's-
initiative. That's an Eagle County Schools initiative. And they, you know, Vail Health is independently pursuing an employer-based childcare. Like I said, I think Vail Resorts is doing, I can't speak to it, but I believe they're pursuing some things on their own. And Eagle County Schools is pursuing their own there. But again, you add up, you know, 2,000 to 3,000 kids that need a spot.
Yeah.
We've got maybe 3 or 4 of these underway. You're still talking about 500 maximum spaces, which is a huge improvement. And we're only a quarter of the way there. That's how big this problem is. Yeah.
So the staff that serves this childcare center, who signs their paycheck?
Yeah, great question. So in our model, we are not, the Vail Valley Foundation is not going to run or operate that. I don't know if I have that yet. So that's right here under the RFP. We do a request for proposals to professional child, existing childcare, probably local, who would then come in and run this childcare center for us, on behalf of, and they would report to a separate board that would probably be its own separate 501c3, call it the Vail Valley Child, or the Eagle River Valley Child Care Board of Directors, nonprofit, but then oversees not only this, but hopefully multiple child care centers in the valley, and then can hire and fire that operator. As long as they're meeting the goals, they would continue on and they would run that. And I think there are many, many different potential candidates. And our hope is that would be eager to do this. Our hope is that, you know, we're working with 3 or 4 providers up and down the valley in the next 5 to 7 years.
A majority of the daycares are needing to be rehomed already anyway.
Which is an issue
Yes.
and in itself. We might be losing some of our
They rent.
inventory.
We're getting-
There's one example of a childcare provider that's in St. Clair with CC's that's been renting that probably its lease has been around 2025. Where do they go? Right? So, you know, it doesn't necessarily solve the problem to take the existing childcare folks and just move them into the stuff we're building. The goal is to increase the overall number of slots for kids to go into, not to just replace existing. But the short answer is who signs the check would be that daycare provider that is hired through the RFP and overseen by a consortium board. And that consortium board would be obviously if there are, let's say it's Acme Company and the Vail Valley Foundation, Acme Company and the VBF would have a couple seats on that board. And we would have a couple slots for kids, you know, for right of first refusal into that school. And then that's how that would proceed. Does that make sense?
And what portion of that budget comes from the foundation or, you know, how's that broken down? How do they get their revenue to run? Obviously, there's a tuition
Yeah,
from the parents. and
that's
then-
right. So you do sliding scale tuition for the affordability factor. And then you have the Vail Valley Foundation doing nonprofit fundraising to subsidize any additional. You have affordable housing involved in the project that theoretically would go to potential right of first refusal to potential teachers to make them, you're not supposed to call them teachers, these are providers, but
Educators.
yeah, educators, thanks, you know. This is where VBF is not an expert in this arena, and people like me are talking a little bit out of school because there are professionals in this valley who really get this stuff. But the idea would be that there would be fundraising done for this nonprofit to help subsidize some of those costs so that you end up with being an attractive place to work and having the space and having the apartments that they can live in that are in the same building and that they're paid that the fundraising component that we can bring is available to help subsidize some of this. And then there's government, state, and federal subsidies as well.
Is there a grant writer involved in the
Correct.
plans?
And this is to the extent that the VVF can flex its grant writing and fundraising muscle. That's one of the things we are experts in and can bring to the table.
I think you've answered it, but how large is that parcel about?
That's a great question. I don't know.
Well,
I don't know the
reason I
acreage
ask
or
is
whatever.
'cause you said that, okay, childcare has to be on the first floor and all the restrictions,
Yeah.
but my assumption, I believe you touched on it, but I just want to know. We need so much housing,
We
whether
do.
it's affordable or you do it in another sector where you can actually raise all the money you need by selling, it can go up.
And we don't have drawings yet, but we're close. And I wish I had them today, but I can describe it to you, which is the first floor is a daycare facility. The second and third and maybe even fourth floors are apartments. Affordable, deed restricted apartment. But I just want to underscore again, success requires collaboration. I keep hearing collaboration among providers, okay? So, because this is a very sensitive time, I just spent an hour on the phone with a gal yesterday who's very concerned that like VVF is gonna come in with all of its, powerful board members and donors, and we're gonna muscle our way in and create like what'll look like a small success, while in the meantime cannibalizing the rest of the industry in the valley. That's not going to happen.
That was a treat.
And we will not, that is not what's gonna happen. That's just the concern that I'm hearing in between, they're not saying that, but I'm reading between the lines here. That's not what's gonna happen. We are working collaboratively to raise all boats. And that, again, that's working with Colorado Mountain College to create a training pathway. It's working with the town of Avon to make sure that we have some affordable housing as part of this. It's all the different things. This is, quote Chris Romer on this one. During one of our meetings, this is a very complicated solution that requires a many-pronged approach. And it's got so many prongs that it's not like a fork, it's like a drawer of forks. Okay, this is a complex issue. It ties into transportation. How are these folks to get to and from? What about this, parents? What if they live in Eagle and they work in Vail? Is this a good location for them? Well, it might be. But what if it's the other way around? They live in Edwards and they're trying to go to Eagle. Well, this location doesn't really work for them. Transportation, housing, all these issues tie together, right? This is one little bite of the apple that the DVF is trying to take action on. So that is essentially it.
When are you starting your capital campaign and when you get to like Berkshire?
Yes, I like this question. I don't know yet. So I will say, so many of you might know that our Senior Vice President of Philanthropy, Sarah Johnson, went to Roundup River Ranch. She's great. And loved working with her. We just yesterday at 7 p.m. announced our new Vice President of Philanthropy, Sierra Adams, who is a wonderfully talented individual who's been on our team for quite a little bit. So we're promoting from within. She's very, very bright. She's an exceptional grant writer. And she has a big, which is super important. So we need to let Sierra guide the answer to that question. But we will be raising money for this and as always, many other things, and certainly appreciate you letting your clients know about it. That's always a good thing. And pointing them in our direction. If they ever want to learn more about what we do, how we do it, or why, that's super important. Because look, in the end, what are we doing? We're trying to raise quality of life for everybody here. We want to make this fundamentally a wonderful place to live, work, and visit. That is what we're trying to do at the VVF. We think that we're pretty good at it, but in the end, hopefully that really benefits y'all Because when you go and say, hey, isn't this a wonderful house? You can also say, and right down here is the Blar Performing Arts Center, where you can go see Broadway shows, you know, a couple times a year. You can see jazz, you can see Kevmo, you can see all these amazing performances. You can go to the Gerald R. Ford Amphitheater for the same. You can go to the Vail Dance Festival. You can go to the Xfinity Birds Parade ski races to see the best ski racers in the world. You know, all of that is based around that same concept, making great moments, making this a great place to live, work, and visit. So.
For people who are vulnerable, people who don't have access, who need access to behavioral health services, employers can have a really big impact on that population that's adversely impacted. Job-related stress is the nation's #1 workplace health problem, and productivity loss from absenteeism due specifically to behavioral health related issues equate to about $225 billion, or around $1,600 per employee per year. So these are some national statistics from the US Labor Department as they've been looking at return on investment on if employers invest in behavioral health, what are some of the positive outcomes? And you can see there's not only a great outcome and better health outcomes of your employees, but also outcomes as far as the financial benefit for employers as well. Really want to dive in with Jen more on the specifics of Mountain Strong, but I always find it a little interesting. So when we kind of were diving into this background, I was interested in how employee benefit programs started, or EAP started. And they actually started back in the 1930s. And so I kind of equated this to Mad Men. I don't know if any of you watched Mad Men, but you think about the 1930s, and it was really common to drink in the workplace. So people would have cocktails, you know, for lunch meetings, they would drink, you know, during the day. And so in the 30s, they started noticing we're kind of getting substance use issues. Like Bob not only was drinking at the lunch meeting when all of us were drinking, but it's 4 o'clock and now Bob isn't productive because Bob's under the table passed out. So EAPs actually started due to overuse of alcohol in the workplace in the 1930s, and they've really evolved ever since. And now many employees kind of look at it as a given, as part of like the overall benefit package. People not only want great benefits as far as retirement or health insurance, but they really expect EAP benefits to be part of that package. So it's a great recruitment tool as well. But again, pretty underutilized across the country. And the reason is you get what you pay for. So in the presentation we'll share, we've got a bunch of statistics on why it's beneficial for employers and how it helps employees. But really want to get into the meat as far as like what we've developed and what is kind of available to employers and employees here in our community.
So the solution to what Dana was talking about, which was that traditional EAPs, they're just not really, they're not working well for the employers. They're underutilized, and quite honestly, most programs make more money if the employees don't use it. And so there's not a whole lot of incentive for the employer to push this great benefit. So with Mountain Strong, what we did was we said, first, we're going to serve our local community. We're going to serve our employees. And then we're going to make sure that this is something that they actually want to use. It's easy to use. And it is a true benefit. So what we do is we offer not just individual therapy with a therapist, but we offer couples therapy. We offer family therapy. We actually provide medication evaluations, which is pretty rare. For EAPs, we do learning disability assessments for children. We have performance optimization and sports psychology, which up here is big. And we also have created some peer support groups. So if your employee is not quite ready for individual therapy, or if they're looking for something to supplement that, we have groups where they can go and meet with people who are not licensed physicians, but what they are is they're people who have lived these experiences and they understand what folks are going through, and they can help lead a group to find ways to help each other heal. We are also looking at expanding our services to include things like life coaching. So that's kind of coming down. We also have other unlicensed support programs and an online resource library. So there's all sorts of ways that folks can utilize the program without necessarily jumping right into seeing a therapist. So if you are an employer and you sign up to provide Mountain Strong EAP to your employees. What we provide are, at a very minimum, 6 free sessions of therapy for each employee. You can decide if you want to cover just your employees or if you want to include their dependents as well. That includes both traditional therapy as well as the medication management that I talked about. We'll take a look at what kind of insurance plans a business has, and we'll make sure that what we can offer fits in with what you're already being served with. We will come in if there's a crisis, if something happens at work or with one of your employees, and as a group, you want to have some emotional support, we'll bring in a therapist to come and talk to folks and provide that support. We do provide in-person as well as video educational training. We do this in both English and Spanish. We have a huge Spanish-speaking population here in Eagle County, and that was definitely one of the things that was not being served by most of the traditional EAPs here. And lastly, we're building an online, what we're calling a behavioral health toolkit. And those are videos and tutorials and online resources and ways that people can help themselves if they're not quite ready to jump into something a little more robust with a therapist.
Since we saw earlier that in the businesses here, what was it, 70% are one person? Are all these programs available then to independent contractors?
We're working on it.
So that's everyone in this room.
Yeah.
Right, and we've got that question, we have gotten that question, and we're trying to find ways to make this work with associations. We haven't figured out all the kinks yet.
And that's actually, yeah, when this presentation opportunity came up, we were like, well, is this a good fit to even present? Because they're individual contractors. So are there opportunities through like affiliations to buy into that? And I'd be really curious to hear from you guys and to hear, you know, from other organizations in the Valley, really what does that look like and how can we best serve that? Because what we found is, and Jen's gonna hit on this, but the system, the online system that we use that's really removed a lot of those barriers that we started talking about at the beginning of the presentation. It's the same system that provides Olivia's Fund. So for those of you who might be familiar with Olivia's Fund, it's a scholarship program in the Eagle County that provides 6 free sessions for anybody who lives and works in the community and demonstrates a financial need. So but what we found is there's higher utilization through our EAP than through Olivia's Fund. And so I continue to find that really interesting. And I don't know if it's due to the stigma piece that you talked about earlier, but people, if it's a benefit through their employer, they're more likely to use it than something that's free to anyone, regardless of where you work, or even
I'd say
if
the
you're
Vail
employed.
Valley Partnership. I mean, I think that would be an awesome place to go. I think you have a lot of women
Working with
shows
Romer.
that already belong to that, like for insurance and those kind of things. There's a lot of people who utilize that, so that could be one idea.
I also, you said Olympics is need-based.
Anyone who demonstrates a financial need, and it's based on % federal poverty level.
Whereas EAP,
Yeah.
you don't have to prove that.
Exactly.
In many cases, it's also confidential.
Yep, and so I'm glad you brought that up, the confidentiality piece, and I think that's why we've seen the increase in utilization, even with employers that had a behavioral health EAP through another party, is we don't share any information with HR. So for those that have small or large employers and they don't want their name tied to that, it's 100% confidential. You don't need a pre-authorization. You just go online, you find a provider, you schedule your own appointment, and then all we pull is like a de-identified number on the back end to pay the invoice. And so with both Olivia's Fund and the EAP, that's really what we've seen is that increase in utilization due to the confidentiality, because you don't have to get permission or tell anyone that you're utilizing those services.
I also think that it hasn't been talked about. I mean, I get the stigmatism from it and it hasn't been talked about, but I think, granted, it doesn't affect us as realtors, but in those businesses, those large companies, I don't know that they actually say, hey, you know, here's a benefit that's available to you. People focus on health insurance, they focus on, you know, paid time off or whatever it is, but I don't think that they necessarily push this and give them the information. I think people find out about it from somebody else. It's more word of mouth. It used to be, and now I think maybe it's coming out which is good.
Yeah, I would agree with that too, because we've even seen that with some of the employers that are already part of our network, is we can tell just based on utilization, which ones are really promoting it, or that's kind of spread through word of mouth, and then those that it's still, I mean, they're paying for it, but they're paying for it not to be used,
Right.
which isn't the point.
Yeah, that resource does put it out there.
Oh, good.
And that's sort of
But they
actually
didn't
how I,
use it,
how I
right.
landed
No, it
it
took a
here,
long time.
Yeah.
was that I worked for Vail Resorts for a very long time. And I knew about this benefit because I worked closely with some of the folks that created it. And I made it a huge push within my group. I worked with the executive team and I said, this is something we need to be talking about. We need to talk about it at every single meeting. And then we started doing it in all the welcome backs. And amazingly, that was kind of how I got to meet Casey Wolfington and Chris Lindley and ended up in this job, because to me, I think that's the most important part of it. If you don't feel like, if you don't know about it, and if you're not being told, hey, this is really for you, we're paying for this, we want you to use this, then folks kind of just, they forget about it.
Yeah, and again, would love feedback from you guys on, you know, whether it's working through VDP or others, because not only have I seen that utilization is increased as it being an employee benefit versus someone, you know, something available to everyone in the community, but it's also really about how do we save community resources for those in our community who are the most vulnerable, those who maybe lost their job or don't have an employer who supports behavioral health. The employers that we've worked with who are in our network and we're talking to adding to our network are supportive of behavioral health, become more supportive really since COVID, as they've seen that's been a need within their workforce. But if we can have our local businesses help support that effort, it saves those resources for those who might not have other options, which as a community really is beneficial for all of us.
Can you just reiterate, maybe you said it earlier, why would a company have this benefit in their policy and not say to their employees at a meeting, you know, if you lost a family member or COVID has hit you in a very negative way, you know, we have this big advantage of it. Why would they do that?
Well, I was gonna say, I think there's a couple of different things. And one was, you know, Dana was talking about the traditional EAD programs, which they make more money if it's not used. So there's not a huge
Because
incentive.
they get paid either way. So if they get paid and then don't have to pay the clinician to provide services, they get to keep that profit. So the more underutilized it is, the more profit for those third-party companies, where we wanted to kind of flip that on its head and say, we want to increase utilization as much as possible because you get what you pay for, right? So if you invest and actually people see someone and get the help they need, they're going to be more productive. You're going to have a higher cost, you know, return on investment. So for us, it's, you only have to pay for those sessions that your employees use. Really, the success metric is an increase in utilization and more employees and dependents actually getting access to services. But I do know for ours, it's really, it's an admin fee to pay for like Jen's time, the system, those pieces. But then the employer only pays for the sessions that are actually used. So it's like, as an employee, if I go see a clinician 5 times, my employer only pays for those 5 sessions, which the traditional model is they pay an X% for all employees, regardless if they're used or not. My employer knows X number of employees used it X number of times, and that's the bill that I pay directly to clinicians. So we don't pay like a third-party administrator. We actually directly work with clinicians. So we've got 107 right now in the network, both all local clinicians and then some telehealth ones as well. And we directly work with them to contract and directly work with them if they're seeing
So that's
our
what you
locals.
guys do.
We like our goal in kind of all the programs we're initiating is how can we increase access overall and increase that access at a local level. So yeah, would love to brainstorm that.
A quick question, just so I understand it. Is your program funded by employers who sign up with you, and do they pay based on the amount of employees that they have, whether they use them or not, or do they pay as they pay as they use your services?
Great question. We are actually a kind of a hybrid model where it's an admin fee initially just to pay for kind of administrative costs. And we have a slide in here that shows like clinical staff, admin staff, the IT system. But then as far as the clinical services, it's a pay as you play. So it's cost depending on the type of provider. So there's a 3-tiered model. So master's levels clinicians, it's $100 a session. Psychologists, it's $130, and for psychiatry, it's $160. And then if they, depending on the number of sessions that the employer approves, some of our really small employers only approve 6 sessions for their employees and dependents a year. Some of our larger employers say it's unlimited. My employees can see a clinician as many times as they want throughout the benefit period. No questions asked. We'll pay those sessions, but then we contract directly with those licensed clinicians in our network. And then every time they see one of our in-network employees, then they get paid that invoice. So we just pay them directly. So then the employer only has to pay for the total number of sessions that their employees and dependents actually used during that benefit period. We're kind of doing this roadshow to get out in front of people, to get ideas, to understand what is the need out in the community and what makes sense for those small companies, because we do have so many of them in our community. And so that's what we're trying to understand is while getting larger employers is great because that's more people who have access to services, we know to really reach everyone in our community, it's not just the larger businesses, it's a lot of the smaller ones. So that's kind of why we're out here presenting and getting thoughts and ideas from folks. Yeah.
And just to give you like a little background, so the reason we're here today is that we presented to the Vail Valley Partnership 2-3 months ago. And everyone we was talking, that we were talking to in that group were all very small businesses. Mel reached out and asked about, what about something like the Vail Board of Realtors? And I said, hey, you know what, at the moment, we don't have something for independent contractors, but we're gonna start looking into how we can do this. And that's what
kind of how we got here. Yeah.
Yeah, and so mostly, we're here to kind of gauge interest, one, and to figure out, how could we make that work? Because I see an association like this acting very similar to a small business. I assume there's membership fees, something like that, and so I feel like there's a way to do it. We're just trying to figure out how to bring everybody in.
This is step one.
Because it's really gauging interest, right? Like there's been some businesses, I think to your point, like some maybe paid lip service to it and weren't really providing services. Others might not be talking about it at all. It might not even be on their radar. And then there's other businesses that have really stepped up and have really increased access to services and quality of services. So I think it's kind of a full spectrum. And so really it's like, we don't want to make assumptions or provide services that aren't useful to certain businesses or industries. But if it is an area of interest, we can further explore what that looks like. And really hearing from those in the industry of what would be most useful to them.
Just kind of back to those BVP Chris's numbers and the size of our businesses of us in the room. I mean, I just pulled it up. 67% of the businesses, or 1,610 in Eagle County, are 1 to 4 employees. So we are independent contractors, right? And there's 900 agents, 800 agents. So I don't know if there's any way to either tier the administrative fee or waive it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that's where you're gonna get buy-in from us independent contractors, because, we're paying our own insurance, we are paying our dues, or this or that, or this or that. And while it's critically important, there's no sponsoring organization to help us. Whereas a business with 4 employees, or 8 employees, 12, like you said, there's a business paying for that, where I am the business.
Yeah, no, and that's a great feedback, because when we kind of started, that's where we started from, is should we have like a tiered admin fee model where I'm gonna shoot in the dark, like 10 employees or less, there is no admin fee, it's waived, and then it builds from there. So that's kind of what we thought about initially. We're really kind of still in the pilot phase. We only have 11 businesses in network right now. So we started small, really wanted to do presentations like this to gauge interest and ideas, but that's kind of the direction that we were going from initially, is for those really small, and then independent contractors, like Jen said, really weren't on our radar at the beginning, but as we've learned more from Chris Romer and BVP as far as what the makeup of employment across our community looks like, that is something that we're gonna have to address.
Is there grant money available for this? Probably is.
There's actually, so talking about grant money at a state level with ARPA funds, I don't know how many of you are familiar with ARPA, but it's Recovery Act funding as a result of COVID. There's millions of dollars that just came in, for around $450 million just for behavioral health that came into the state of Colorado that has to be spent by December of 2024. So we're in the process of applying for every grant we're eligible for. It's not specific right now to like employee benefits, but it is specific to behavioral health as a result of adverse effects from the pandemic, which I think mentioned earlier, a lot of people are hurting right now. A lot of people were impacted based on the industry that they're in. So there's potential, absolutely, that we could help build infrastructure for multiple behavioral health programs if we're able to get access to some of that funding here in Eagle County.
Bring it back to the point that I think you're all making. That's why we're here. We're here to get your great ideas and to hear. I mean, like, I love the idea of donating services. And granted, like, we're not the company that can do that, but I mean, I think in this room, everybody's got at least one great idea. And so that's why we're here, because we do want to find a way to extend a program like this to folks that are not served by it at this very moment.
Yeah, and getting creative and getting thoughts. Yeah, I mean, the tiered model, definitely gonna, kind of bring that back to the team and look, using the data that was presented. And then like associations, because we were kind of, talking at traditional employers, but I think associations are another great model, again, where there's interest and willingness to explore that further.
So we talked a little bit about cost in the model and how that works. Just a few stats on the impact that we're having so far on the community. So our EAP is serving 11 different businesses right now. We're bringing one on right now. That's over 3,000 employees. It's over 8,000 unique lives if you count employees and dependents. So 8,000 people in Eagle County are being served just by the EAP program. And then through Olivia's fund, we've got 3,400 sessions that have been used so far, and that represents almost 800 unique patients. So those are folks who are the underserved. Of those, let's see, 3,400 sessions, 240 of those were given in Spanish, and that number is increasing exponentially right now.
Is that just this year?
That one, I think that is 240 sessions. That's got to be this year. Yes, I believe so. And I apologize, I just got these numbers this morning, but I believe so.
And our annual data is a little funky because it falls on Vail Health's fiscal year, not a normal calendar year. So it's November 1 of 21 to November or to October 30th of 22. So.
And in that course of time, so when I started, that was the end of March, we had 5 providers who could give sessions in Spanish. And so we brought on another 40 providers this year. I'm prioritizing providers who can give sessions in Spanish, and I'm making sure there's kind of special perks to bring them in, making sure they can get licensed in Colorado, which we'll cover. And so now we brought on 40 new providers, and we now have 12 that can give sessions in Spanish. So that number is going to keep going up. And I've got actually 2 more in my back pocket at the moment that are hopefully I'm bringing on in the next few weeks.
I'm sorry, how many do you have on staff?
Right, they're not on staff, so these are all contractors like yourself. We have 12 right now that are providing sessions in Spanish.
And are they also probably signed up for whatever the term is with other companies, or are these just yours?
Yeah, so many of them are. So they're contractors with us. They sign contracts to be in our network, but many of them are private providers that live here in the community that, in addition to charging those cash pay sessions that we talked about earlier, agree to be in our network and accept our reimbursement rates. And for all of the employees or Olivia's fund clients that they see, then we just pay them directly for those services.
But you're sharing their time with other companies as well?
Yes.
And not all of them. So I think 4 of the 12 actually are Colorado Mountain Medical, which is part of our network, and they are strictly serving our clients.
Okay. Thanks for what you guys are doing.
Oh, no, of course. In the time since we started, we've expanded our number of providers from 5 to, by the end of this week, we'll have 108. So that's a pretty significant increase that definitely is going to make access of care in this community something that is reasonable, because definitely with 5 before it wasn't. And just to give you an idea of what a program like this, when it's supported by a company or by a group like the Board of Realtors, the Vail Health utilization rate went from, as Dana said, a little under 2% to now, when I checked yesterday, it was 24.6%. And that's pretty remarkable. And I think when you think about medical personnel and the kind of burnout that they've been experiencing over the last couple of years, I don't think we'd be hanging on to our staff if they didn't have a resource like this. All right, we're not going to go through staffing. I'll give you just a real couple quick things about our providers, because I think this actually is relatable on this platform. So 108 providers. Oh, and I was wrong, 14 of which now speak Spanish, do sessions in Spanish. And the reason that we've been able to build this number of providers is what we are doing different from other EAPs is we're addressing some pretty serious concerns that providers had, and it was their highest reason for dropping out. They weren't being paid well. We've negotiated a reimbursement rate that I think is fair to both the folks that are paying for the services as well as for the providers giving it. So they're not leaving out of hand because they are making enough to get by. We take care of their billing, we take care of their administrative headaches. So if they are an independent contractor, we can make this a lot easier for them. And then we've added people on staff like myself and like our case managers who are dedicated to the providers and to our patients. We answer questions, address their concerns right away. Whereas before, I think sometimes they could, if they were upset about something, they could be waiting quite some time. We're offering a couple of great benefits. We help pay for their continued education. We're giving them a wellness credit to go out and do things to take care of themselves. And we are giving them access to a pretty great number to increase their caseload. As Dana mentioned, by law, we have to have all of our providers licensed here in Colorado because that's 99% of the folks that we're serving. So we do have some out-of-state providers doing telehealth, but we make sure that all of those end up having to get licensed before I can actually onboard them into our system. I do a good hour-long onboarding session with each new provider. I talk to them if they are not familiar with our community. I give them the whole Chris Stromer speech on how this community works and what our challenges are and what they'll see. And so they all know before they even see their first client what some of the issues are up here. We're doing a ton of recruiting. We have been using Indeed, we've been using social media, we have traditional recruitment. I'm getting great word of mouth from our new providers because they're really enjoying this program. And so we're working on doing some provider referrals when they bring in great people. And then we offer those special perks for providers who can come on and speak Spanish.
And I know technology wasn't our friend today, but technology has been a real big reason that we've been able to be successful with this program with the kind of online tools that we built out. So if you're interested and you have time, I would encourage you to go to mountainstrong.org. You can go in and kind of play around, see a list of the providers, see what it looks like to log in as a patient. So if it is an area of interest, you think that's something that might be beneficial for you or for colleagues, kind of for the association, let us know. We'll be happy to brainstorm more, find ways that this could be relevant and beneficial for you guys moving forward.